Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever in the world you may be joining us from today. My name is Francesco Del Carpio, and I am the CFAL York Operations Coordinator. I would like to officially open the first session in our new Localizing the Canadian Supply Chain, Understanding Sector-Specific Impacts on U.S. Tariffs speaker series. I would like to begin today with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge and recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territory upon which our campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. The area is known as Tkaronto and has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and that the territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. As this is an online event, our participants may be joining from various locations, so I strongly encourage you to learn about the traditional land upon which you are located. With this, I welcome our moderator, our speakers, and our participants from around the world. Welcome to our webinar. For those who may not be familiar with CFAL York, our center was established in 2020 and started its operations in 2021. CFAL York was created in collaboration between the United Nations Institute for Training and Research and York University with York Region to develop and deliver training and knowledge sharing, as well as capacity building programs across 5 focus areas, which are disaster risk, emergency management, and humanitarian action, health development, environment and climate change, entrepreneurship, digital technology and economic development, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and advancing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce our moderator, Janet Song. With expertise in community development, business leadership, and strategic operations, Janna is committed to driving meaningful impact. Previously, as Senior Operations Lead at the Canadian Urban Institute, she helped administer the $15 million My Main Street grant program to support business growth in Southern Ontario. Previously, as Executive Director of the Prince Rupert and District Chamber of Commerce, she championed economic development for over 250 businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic. She also revitalized immigrant services at Hecate Strait Employment Development Society, launching a community garden, public farmers market plans, and large-scale job fairs. Her passion for social impact and sustainability is reflected in her work with organizations like the United Nations Global Compact Network Canada, Public Inc., and the Canadian Cancer Society. With a strong track record in project management, event coordination, and community engagement, she continues to drive economic growth, sustainability, and inclusive development. Janet, thank you so much for moderating today's session and all of your help putting this series together. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Francesco. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Okay, so let's get started with some housekeeping rules for you to understand how we can be part of an engaging session. First of all, as this session is being recorded and this will be shared with participants after the event, and we encourage diversity of thought that is respectful and courteous. So ways to engage include having the chat box function where you can introduce yourself, say your name, your organization if you'd like, and the community that you're part of. And we highly encourage resource sharing because during this time of uncertainty in our economy, we just need more resources to understand how to navigate. Next, we have a Q&A section box. So if you have any questions, speakers will answer after presentations. And last thing that I really appreciate about this is the raise your hand function. In the second half of this session, we will have a roundtable discussion to talk about how can we all be part of localizing the Canadian supply chain. And a follow-up is that we're going to have a summary and shared resources emailed to all attendees. And finally, there's a certificate of completion for attendees who participate for 50% of the sessions. So I hope to see you again. Next is, one second. I want to give an overview of the speaker series, which is called Localizing the Canadian Supply Chain, Understanding Sector-Specific Impacts on the U.S. Tariffs. So this is a 1-hour bi-weekly speaker series from April to June, where we go deep diving into sectors every 2 weeks on the U.S. tariff impacts on Canadian supply chains. We feature insights from industry experts, and the key sectors covered today being automotive manufacturing. Next session being agriculture and fisheries. Afterwards, energy, then aerospace, then food and beverage manufacturing, and finally, forestry, food, and construction. And our goals and objectives of this series is one, understanding Canadian sectors impacted by these tariffs and how can it have a ripple effect and how can we strengthen it long term. Additionally, analyzing that tariff impact, especially with so many changes, how can we understand, create more certainty, and plan for the future? Next, discuss policy and trade responses. And finally, hear industry insights. The intended outcome is for us to co-create together. I hope after every single session, we come out with great resources that we can share. And finally, at the end of this series, when you stick by with us, get your certificate, we hope you get a supply chain resiliency strategy guide from us that will help businesses, economic developers, and beyond at the end of this series to help people plan for the future. Here's the agenda for today's session. Next, we're going to move on to after introductions, we're going to move on to Janna Streef, who is going to provide an overview of tariff impacts and the role of customs to support businesses. And then Brendan Sweeney from the Trillium network of advanced manufacturing is going to provide an impact of tariffs on automotive and manufacturing sector overview. And finally, we're going to have a Q&A and roundtable discussion. So here are amazing speakers, Janna Streef, who is going to start us off, who's the owner and founder of Integrated Custom Services Inc. And then I'm going to share the introduction of Brendan Sweeney, who's the managing director of Trillium Network for Advanced Manufacturing. First off, I'm going to introduce Janna's bio. She is the founder and owner of the Integrated Custom Service Limited, a trusted customs brokerage firm based in Woodstock, Ontario. With over 40 years of experience as a qualified customs broker with a professional designation, as well as her certified customs services, Janna has been a strong leader in the industry, helping businesses navigate the complexities of international trade. For more than 25 years, she has successfully operated Integrated Custom Services Limited, providing expert guidance on customs compliance, import-export regulations, and trade facilitation. Her deep industry knowledge and commitment to client success has made her an exemplary resource for businesses looking to streamline cross-border operations. So I'm now going to have Janna present.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Francesco and Janet, for inviting me on here. I have about 10 minutes to try and tell you all about the tariffs that are affecting us right now. And I honestly believe for 2025, the word tariff is going to become very important to all of us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to navigate through this and try to help businesses, small and medium businesses, to understand what the tariffs are doing right now and how they're going to affect you. So I think the very first thing we have to do is, what is a tariff? So a tariff is a tax that's imposed by governments on goods that are imported from other countries into Canada, often used to protect the domestic industries and raise revenue. It works by increasing the price of imported goods, potentially making them less competitive with domestically produced goods. So a tariff is a good that is going to be have a certain amount of duties on those types of goods, that if those goods are also available in Canada, you're going to have to pay a little bit more to get those in, because we are trying to protect our Canadian domestic market by ensuring that the people in Canada are actually importing and choosing Canadian first over outside of Canada. Next one, Janet. So what does it look like? So a tariff code, or otherwise known also as an HS code, a harmonized system code, is an internationally standard numerical method developed by the World Customs Organization. So all of the countries that are registered with the WCO, their 10-digit code for all products, the same product for every single country, will be the very same thing. So the first 6 digits If we're importing shoes into Canada and Italy is importing the same shoe, the first 6 digits are the same. And then the next 4 digits are indigenous to that particular country, and they're usually used for statistical purposes. You're going to notice in my slides too that I'm also going to include a lot of links so that you can actually go in and take a look. So I've included the customs tariff book for Canada Customs to find certain tariff codes, and I've included the US tariff code as well. Next, Janet. CUSMA. We have to talk about CUSMA, even though right now we're not really using the CUSMA because the Trump administration is not exactly cohering to the agreement that they had actually produced when Trump was back in office in 2018. So the Canada, United States, Mexico agreement is a CUSMA. It is known by 3 different, it is the same document, but known by 3 different names depending on the country itself. So the CUSMA is still alive and well between Mexico and Canada. It's just a little blurry right now between US and Canada. Next. Surtaxes. This is what we need to be talking about because this is what we're talking about right now in the news. And I will let you know too that right now, when I made this PowerPoint presentation, you know, I have to give you a disclaimer that just because that I say something today, guess what? Tomorrow could be very, very different. And that has certainly happened. We've already had changes as of yesterday. But the surtax are certain goods that are taxed going into the USA that are of Canadian origin. This is mostly affecting the automotive industry right now, as well as the steel and aluminum raw and finished goods. So these goods, I have also provided a link. Take a look. It talks about all the aluminum goods, raw, as well as some finished goods, again, mostly the automotive industry, going into the USA, as well as a list of the goods that are coming into Canada that will be affected by the surtax. And right now it is 25%. That little line at the bottom of that slide, the melt and pour requirements, the US as well as Canada are now requiring that any of those goods that are affected with that HS code, they require to know the country that the goods were melted and poured, or the country of smelting. That is something that your customs broker will be asking you if you fall under that. Okay, next slide. This is very important to know because upon talking to certain people, the IOR, the importer of record, that is the person who's responsible for the payment of these surtaxes. So if that is you, the Canadian company, and you are sending goods into the US and you are the IOR, you are responsible for paying those taxes. But if your US vendor is going to be clearing the goods into their own country, which I'm going to strongly suggest that you get them to do that, so the liability is off of you, the Canadian importer, then they are responsible for the payment of any surtaxes. So that IOR is very, very important. You need to make sure you know who that is at the time of your agreement when you buy and sell goods. Then the amount of surtax is always based on that HS or tariff code and the country of origin. Next. The automotive industry, I'm just going to touch on this because I believe Brendan is going to go a little bit deeper in this, but a lot of the automotive parts are going back and forth across the border several times. They're just being worked on, they're being built up into whatever that finished product will be and put into a vehicle at that point in time. So right now the surtax will be applied on the US value coming into Canada and the Canadian value going into the USA. So if there is a part that's going across the border from Canada to the US and 50% is Canadian and 50% is US, the surtax is not applied on the US value. It's only applied on the Canadian value. This will become something very important for the automotive industry to figure out the part that they're sending, how much of it is Canadian and how much of it is actually US. And that goes for both sides of the border. So when the new tariffs were presented by the Trump administration, there will now be certain tariffs on all goods coming from many countries in the world. This has now, as of yesterday, all of that has been stepped back now for 90 days. The 10% tariff is still on all these goods, but now the other tariff, which was a lot higher, is going to be stopped for about 90 days, except for China. China has now gone from 104% to, I believe, 124%. This is our trade war, people. This is what's happening right now between China and the USA. So that effect on the automotive industry, we'll see plants and their tier 1 and tier 2 companies shut down completely. We have already heard of some in the very southwestern Ontario area that have shut down, and those customer relations will be damaged. People will lose their businesses, which puts the entire automotive sector on dangerous ground. The effect on small businesses is huge. The US surtax on goods from Canada, particularly for small businesses, will likely lead to increased costs, potential supply chain disruptions, and reduced competitiveness in the US market, potentially forcing small businesses and medium-sized to seek alternative markets or face reduced profit margins. So these small businesses, these medium businesses really need to look at their profit margins and can you actually support the surtax? And if not, you will have to look at other ways to either get your goods sold to other countries that are not the US or find other supply chains to help you with those goods. Next. The increased cost on reduced competitiveness. These are just a list of items that we could find right now that are going to definitely be detrimental to any business. Your higher export costs. Right now, if your goods fall in within the, right now into Canada, into the US, Canadian goods, again, it's just really the steel and the aluminum and automotive parts right now. But if your goods fall in there, you are going to be paying a higher surtax. There's going to be a reduced demand for your goods. And the US obviously wants everybody to buy US goods. That's what their thing is they want everybody to support their own companies and their own US companies. So for a Canadian company, that demand is going to be reduced. Your market diversification, there's going to be many, many challenges on that. You'll have to explore alternative markets to mitigate the negative impact of those tariffs. And finding those new markets are going to be very challenging and time consuming. Your profit margin reduction, businesses are going to have to either absorb it or you're going to have to figure out with your US vendors if they're going to absorb it. That is something that you're going to have a very big talk with your US vendors. You're going to be very vulnerable in this and your supply chain disruption, trying to get parts for goods, especially if you're going to get parts from China right now and then try to sell those goods into the US, it's going to be very costly at your end. Next one. Logistical and financial challenges. Obviously, there's going to be financial challenges. Again, we talked about absorbing those costs. Can you do it? The uncertainty and hesitancy, if you've noticed just in the last 30 days, we've been going back and forth. We're on a roller coaster right now. We don't know what's coming and going. And myself as a customs broker, we're in the same boat as you are, trying to figure out and understand what is coming out of the White House right now and trying to understand how that's going to affect our clients here in Canada. There's financial support and countermeasures, the trade impact program, the remission process. There is a remission process that small and medium businesses and large businesses can apply to the Canadian government to see if they can get a remission on the goods and the surtax that they have paid out, or get the goods that they're importing. If they're not available in Canada, you can actually argue your point, and maybe there is a way that the Canadian government can come back to you and give you some sort of a reduced cost or even a refund or something on any of these surtaxes that you're paying out. Next. So what can you do? You can take a look at what you're importing, ensure you have the proper description of your goods. That's very important because the proper description is going to give you the correct tariff classification. Make sure you have the country of origin correct. Again, those are the two major things that's going to decide whether you're paying those surtaxes or not. Your customs broker, of course, can be of great assistance to you in ensuring you have proper compliance. If you're requiring goods from the US in your production, can you source these goods from Canada or a foreign country, but not in the USA? Remembering that there will be cost of transportation, which can inflate your cost of production. Look for different markets to sell your goods. Explore the Canadian government support programs to assist small businesses to succeed. Next. I'm only going to touch on this right now because it's very big in the US, the de minimis rule. This is not affecting Canada yet, but we have heard that they're talking about it. So that de minimis exemption going into the US is for all goods that were valued under $800 US. Those goods were allowed to enter the US quite freely, and they did not have to be touched by a customs broker. They did not have to pay any duties and taxes against it. But due to the, we'll say the fentanyl issue, the drug issue, it's very easy for these small packages to come in with drugs. And this is where the White House has decided that that can't happen anymore. So I do believe that May 2nd, I guess they're going to remove the de minimis exemption, which is going to really affect anybody that does Amazon, anybody that imports Shein, Etsy, any of those smaller companies that need the products from those other countries to come into Canada to make their products. It's going to be huge because now you're going to be paying on something that you've never ever had to do before. Right now, again, this is only going into the USA. I just want our Canadian businesses to be aware of this because it may happen in Canada as well. Next. That is basically the end. Hopefully I have been able to give you some food for thought anyways, and try to help you in trying to understand and navigate these tariffs. And again, I thank Janet and Francesco for letting me speak to you about this.
Thank you so much, Janna, for all of that information because you really simplified the impact of tariffs. And I think it's so important for businesses who are not sure and confused to not figure it out on their own. They can go to a customs broker. They can it's a good starting place to hear from you, perhaps connect from you afterwards, and just ask, what do I do from here? How do I make a plan? Because these are the big questions. And now we're going to dive deeper into more of the automotive field with Brendan Sweeney, who is the managing director of the Trillium Network for Advanced Manufacturing. So Brendan joined the Trillium Network for Advanced Manufacturing in September 2019 as a managing director. He's the second longest tenured employee, and prior to his appointment with Trillium Network, Brendan served as a project manager and research director of the Automotive Policy Research Center at McMaster University, where he also taught in the DeGroote School of Business and the School of Labor Studies. His goal for the year is to hone Trillium's network's expertise as a thought leader, providing valuable insight to manufacturing partners and stakeholders throughout the province of Ontario. So I'm going to let Brendan take the stage and share his screen.
Thanks, Janet, and thanks everyone. This is great. Hope to have some good conversation here. And like Janna mentioned, this tariff thing, it's live, it's dynamic. Whatever's happening today might not be what's happening tomorrow. And there's a general expectation that this is going to continue for at least a couple weeks until we have an elected, at least until we have an elected PM. I think it's important to remember Canada's not alone in this. We're just the closest. So we're kind of first up. But there's certain advantages of being in Canada, like we know how to do business with the United States. And remember, Canada and the United States do not export and import. Companies in Canada and companies in the United States import and export. So that's, really where the rubber is going to hit the road. There's a lot of, at worst, misinformation, and at best, what I like to call verisimilitude, or, things that seem true. Maybe they were true once, but they're not quite true anymore. There's a lot of that floating around right now. And I'll give you a couple examples. One, that these tariffs are going to cause the automotive industry to shut down in 3 hours or in 3 days or in 3 weeks. Well, it's not true. They're not. It's not happening. They're causing automakers and parts makers a lot of grief, and different companies are going to respond differently for different reasons. Some will curtail production. Some have curtailed production in Canada, and some won't. And I can talk a little bit about why that is, maybe in the roundtable. So that's one. Two, that automotive parts automatically cross the border 7 times or 8 times or 18 times. There are a small number of parts that do, usually powertrain stuff, that do cross the border 6, 7 times. There's parts that don't cross the border at all. And I can think of something that, steel that is rolled in Hamilton, that goes to Magna somewhere in York region, that gets stamped, that goes to Honda in Alliston, turned into a Civic, and that Civic gets sold in Canada. So that part, I mean, I guess the coal might cross the border on the way to the steel mill. We've done some analysis on this, and the median number of border crossings for parts is around 3. So parts do cross the border, but not automatically 7 or 8 times. Then there's another narrative, and certain policymakers really like this one, but that SMEs dominate the automotive industry. And that's absolutely and patently false. Every automaker is just a massive company, right? Not an SME. And then about 80% of where the work gets done, making parts in the supply chain, happens essentially at what we often refer to as the tier 1 level or by upper tier companies. I think where people get confused is that there are a lot of little suppliers. There's a lot of little companies. There's probably about 400 of them in Canada. If you add all of what they do up into one bucket, they employ about as many people as in Canada as Magna does. So all of the SMEs together employ about as many people as the largest manufacturer in the automotive space in Canada. So when it comes to our response to all this, it really should be based on reality rather than narrative, in my humble opinion. And so I'm going to share with you a couple other, 3 more, just a sec. Three more pieces of information that I think can help us make sense of the industry in Canada, where we have come from, where we are, and where we're going. And this one is the all important. How many cars do we buy? How many cars do we make? Canada used to make more cars than it sold. Most of those cars, 85 to 90%, depends how you measure it, go to the United States. The lion's share of the remainder stay in Canada. We don't really ship cars to Europe or China or Japan or Mexico or anywhere else. A handful, but not many. So that production to sales ratio has changed, and in 2019, for the first year in decades, Canada made fewer vehicles than we consumed. About half the cars that we buy in Canada come from the United States. About 14% come from Mexico, about 11% come from Canada, the rest come from the EU and Asia. Right now, about 3% are coming in from China. So there are Chinese-made vehicles on the road in Canada. A small number by Chinese-owned companies, Volvo Cars being the biggest of those. Big change in production is which companies are making cars in Canada. Last year, Toyota made about 530,000. Honda made about 420,000. And the others combined made about 419,000. So that's a big change compared to 2015, 2005, 1999. And I don't know to what degree people are actually aware of that. Now you're aware of that if you weren't already. When it comes to so we make a lot of parts in Canada. Where do we sell those parts? Green Bars Canada. Right? So a lot of the parts made in Canada, the place where they're initially shipped is somewhere else in Canada. They may go to an assembly plant or to an upper tier plant and then get re-exported, but the initial destination is a plant in Canada. It's about 43%. A very similar number made in Canada goes to the US Midwest, primarily to US-based companies. and then a small number to the U.S. South, a small number to the rest of the U.S. In this case, that's primarily California and Tesla. We do make parts for Tesla, and our trade with Mexico, Europe, Asia is negligible. So that's where things are going. That's how dependent our part sector is on both the Canadian production and American production. Another one, and this is, I think maybe should be of interest to anyone joining us from the United States, and something to watch out for, is that, this idea that the US has kind of scaled down its business with China. Absolutely not. The US electric vehicle industry relies on China for batteries. That yellow bar, that's CAM and PCAM mostly. That's what goes into batteries. Most of that's coming from Japan and Korea. But Japan and Korea are themselves buying raw materials, or minimally processed materials from China. And there's some that's coming to light in the United States right now, and regulators are trying to figure out how to treat that. But anyway, that big green slice of the pie, those are batteries. That might be battery cells, that might be fully assembled battery packs. Anyway, the US for now is not going to do electric vehicles without China. That's about $32 billion worth of imports from to the BEV imports. I think like 29 billion of those are from China. And that number has just, that number was like 3 billion in 2019. And now it's 32 billion. So something to watch out for. And this is some of this kind of fallacy of trying to not do trade with China. The US, Canada, Taiwan all suffer from it because they all rely on China for really important things. Weaning off that is going to be really, really hard. And I can probably assure you, just say, okay, well, why don't we just buy the materials from China and make the batteries in North America? Why in the world would China want to do that? To sell you lower value things instead of higher value things that they've designed an export-based industry around. So really, really, keep an eye on this, because I think it's really important. So what these slides and what my comments were made to do, what I hope that they would do, just get us started thinking about the scale of this, about where we're actually at, what it all means for the automotive industry in Canada, where we've come from, where we are, and where we might be headed. And so when we get into the discussion, happy to go into further detail about any of this. It's hard to cover off the automotive industry in 10 minutes.
Thank you so much, Brendan, for providing us with a story. I really love how the Trillium Network for Advanced Manufacturing not just uses data that people don't really fully dig into, but you also create a narrative that provides such value for people to understand, what does this mean for Canada? What does this mean for US? What does this mean about our future plans? I really love of how you also showcased how there is needs for more markets, of how Canada is highly reliant in the US market, and there is just a smidge of everything else beyond the US. So maybe it's the time for us to rethink of how, or businesses to rethink of where the markets are at, where the supply chains are at, and how can we get more production occurring in Canada. So now we're going to go into the roundtable discussion, because I'm not seeing any questions. I see one question. Okay, so can you please confirm the current value of tariffs on Canada? Do we have the 10% baseline tariffs, or is it 25% on auto aluminum? Janna, I feel like you should start this off.
Okay, so this is what we understand is happening. We do have the 25% on the steel and aluminum that's going into the USA as well as coming into Canada. The other stuff for coming into Canada, there is no other tariff. For going into the US, there's no other tariff at this point in time. That could change tomorrow. Again, anything I say is just, I can only answer for today because things are changing quite quickly. It's so right now for Canada, it is the 25% surtax on the steel and aluminum and the automotive. That was yesterday. So we have vehicles now that are also tariffed.
Awesome. Thank you. Anything to add? Or I can move on to, oh, there's another one. Okay, is there any potential? So Catherine asked if there's any potential to untangle our automotive manufacturing supply chain from the US. Shipping costs seem quite prohibitive to get to other markets, even Mexico.
It would be a long time coming. Shipping costs for high value products are annoying, but they won't stop things. The likelihood that we could just untangle from the US, I mean, even if we did that as a kind of all hands mission, um, it would take, let's just say, more years than someone gets to be president in the United States. And I think we really have to walk back to and remember that, whether it was the Biden era United States, whether it was the Obama era, even the Bush era, Clinton era, why did we like doing business with the United States? Well, I mean, they're a theoretically democratically governed country with rules, an affluent country. They pay people well. And doing business with Mexico is not unproblematic. The levels of government, union, police, corruption in Mexico are considerably higher than those in Canada and the United States. Similarly, doing business in China, we do business in China, but that is not without its problems. And then just the amount of business to be done right now with Germany, France, Italy, Spain, the UK, Sweden. They've got their own things to worry about. Certainly there might be more Canada-Germany business down the road, but to completely integrate, to go it alone and or to untangle from the United States is unrealistic in the next 5 years.
Thanks, Brendan. Before we go a little further from to the next question, you just came back from Germany, and there was that major market there to discuss and talk about potentials. What is your thought on the market of Europe? Because it's quite costly for a lot of businesses to go there, and it's quite a smidge in your graph. What does that look like for Canada and more European ties with the markets?
Yeah, it would be for more higher value goods in more kind of custom areas where I think some of the fruitful conversations and are often around, okay, Germany and Canada have both committed at least, have a narrative commitment to increased NATO spending, to increase defense spending. And so what would that look like if Canadian companies and German companies and Swedish companies were working together on that? So there are some adjacencies to the automotive industry, but the initial conversations are not about automotive specifically. I think one thing that's important to remember is that there are Chinese-made vehicles on the roads in Canada and the United States. They're just not Chinese badged necessarily. Volvo Cars is a Chinese company. It's Chinese owned. They're making cars in the United States, and we buy those cars in Canada. But BYD, Geely, SAIC, they're not really on the road in Canada, the United States. You know where they are on the road? everywhere else, including Mexico, including Germany, including France. And I think that's one thing that we have to remember, that us going into Germany and trying to sell cars there, no, China got there first. And they can ramp that up, especially if the United States is closed off to Fortress North America for the time being, with the exception of Mexico, where there are Chinese badged cars on the road these days. So
Yeah, thanks for guiding us through of, who has market power in different places. So now Ashton is asking, how would it affect the development of projects, keeping in mind the price changes of aluminum and steel? Would it have a direct impact? Yeah, because aluminum and steel has 25% tariffs right now, largest. So would that impact a lot of development projects, not just automotive, as you were just speaking on beyond that?
yes, yes, it's going to make things more expensive, and we have focused on in Canada. Um, I don't know as much about aluminum as I do about steel, and just being from Hamilton and all. We have chosen a path decades ago in Canada where we make a pretty high grade of steel. A lot of it goes to the automotive industry, and so other grades of steel, we've left to other companies in other countries. So, we make more automotive steel than we do construction steel. So it's we rely on exports, we rely on imports. Costs are going to go up.
Okay. Well, yeah, major supply chain costs will go up and we will be seeing it. That's why I called this session Eye of the Storm. And we have a question from Rafia. So she is asking about your research. So can you please elaborate on the US BEV imports by segment chart? How did you estimate the value of imports from China? What year are these statistics from? And what do you anticipate that the Trump administration's anti-EV policies will change these import statistics?
I did not estimate the value. Those are numbers from what we did was we started with an UNCTAD report that uses HS codes, that assigned HS codes to different battery segments. It's a great little report. And then we went, right to U.S. Department of Commerce, trade data. It's not paywalled, but it's login. We operate out of a university, out of Western University, so we get a little bit of access, and so that is U.S. trade data down to the dollar. It's not estimates. How do I anticipate that the Trump again, is the Trump administration anti-EV, or are they, he does go and hold coal, but on the other hand, he holds his buddy Elon pretty close to him. Are they anti-IRA? Are they anti-Biden policies? Yeah, I'd give you that. And how will that change those statistics? They're going to go down. And the United States may buck the global trend, the trend for the rest of the world, that, is more electrification. That said, there are those in California, a state with an economy and a population considerably larger than that of Canada. You're going to take electric vehicles away from Californians kicking and screaming. And the same would be true in some other parts, Washington state, not nearly as big as California. So it's going to go down, but it's not going to go to zero. In California, you have a class of consumer who can afford to pay another $10,000 or $20,000 for the EV they want. And then we'll see how Tesla chooses to advise. We'll see how Elon chooses to advise Trump on this. It's going to go down, but it's not going to go to zero.
Thank you, Brendan, for sharing about the EV, because it's a good point that you brought. Elon Musk is right next to him and he has Tesla. So now we're having a couple of questions that I'm going to group together because they focus on the worried aspect of automakers shutting down. So one question stated, you mentioned automakers will not shut down quickly as some have predicted. Can you expand on this? I'll give you a little bit more, like in review on which countries and regions of Canada should you focus on building relationships to keep the automotive sector going? And how long will it take to establish to keep our plants and auto suppliers at full capacity? So overall, the question is more of how do we keep those automakers going and partnerships? How long would it take to keep going at full capacity and beyond? Because this is a hit.
Some automakers will continue to go at full capacity. There are automakers that view North America as kind of this integrated industry and an integrated market. And so they see the tariffs as just, it's going to roll up to the bottom line. They can make it work. There are others who see each individual plant as a profit center, and they're going to have a harder time with it. And that's just different, different approaches by different automakers. There's a notion, and I think one advanced by Morris Chang, the founder of TSMC, of maybe the most important company in the world, that when you start laying people off, you're just, that's 6 months worth of, there's a 6-month cost there. When you bring people back to work, there's a 6-month cost there. So anytime you do that, that's a year's worth of cost. Again, that's with semiconductors. So, you can change the calculus a bit as you see fit, but there is a cost to winding things down or shutting things down. There's a cost to bringing things back online. Especially the more you pay, the more there is a cost on the way in. The less you pay, the more there is a cost when you have to go find people to work again. So I think there's generally a thought that certain companies, especially those that make a lot of the cars in Canada, are going to keep on keeping on and hope that after we elect a prime minister in a couple of weeks, that the real negotiations start, and that sometime in the summer we kind of get past this dynamism and onto something we can live with. So
Thanks, Brendan. It's another reminder for people to make sure you vote at the end of this month. And we're having I do want to share, people can raise their hands up. We're talking more about community impact here. I know that there are some EDOs here. Many people from the EDCO world are in this call right now. Feel free to share about what your community is doing. How is it impacting, even for good? I've heard that in the Minto Alliston space that, things are pretty good right now. I think there's a lot of business strategy to come into place because we're hearing the eye of the storm. Nothing is really hitting right now. There is costs there, but people have inventory, so things are still trucking through. So please do raise your hand up if you want to add, because I know that some people here are representing communities where automotive sector is a big part of the workforce. So now we're going on to, these are roundtable questions as well. So I invite you to speak. I would love to have other speakers as well chime in to have this conversation. So the question we have here are, what factors would keep companies in Canada? With Trump all over the media, it seems like the assumption is that access to the US market would make a lot of companies choose to relocate there.
careful what you wish for. Purely anecdotal, but I have a cousin runs a food processing facility in Cheektowaga, New York, minutes from the Canadian border. 10 or 15 years ago, when they were out looking for people, for labor, they were encouraged and went down a path where they were recruiting recently former military who had come back from conflict zones, and not without challenges integrating those folks into their operations, and they did that. Today, Any guesses as to when, they're facing very low unemployment and a labor shortage? I mean, is there any guesses as to which demographic they're being asked to engage with now to staff their food processing facility? Recently, formerly incarcerated people. So, places in Michigan, in Ohio, and Kentucky have 4% of theoretical low unemployment. So if you're going to go down there, unless there are going to be municipalities who throw money at you. There are going to be politicians who throw love at you. But if that's what you want to deal with, rates of domestic violence, of drug addiction are considerably higher in many of these parts of the United States. There's parts of the United States that are great to do business in, but the reality of the labor market is one now that I'd be very cautious. You might be better off, selling the real estate and buying a cottage and, spending winters in Mexico than operating in one of these spots in the US right now, because it might be more headaches than it's worth. So, right, the labor force just isn't there. So
Lots of uncertainty. You have Trump, who is providing very different policies every day. So one thing to think about when you're a business is political stability is definitely a thing. So I'm going to dive into, we have two more questions left. So one is, I want to start this off, and then the last question, I'll end it off. Okay, so how can we support enhanced resilience in our manufacturing supply chains here in Canada? Are there sectors that companies should look to reorient to? Can we better connect our suppliers across Ontario, the country? What would be needed to do that?
that's a good question. I mean, I think if indeed we do get nuclear investment, if we are going to build one or more reactors in the next decade, getting a program to prepare suppliers and prepare smaller businesses for that. If you have a small supplier who is used to supplying automotive and they're trying to get into nuclear, the specs on automotive might be even more detailed, even more rigorous than those for nuclear. So a program, if we know we're going to do this, probably in Ontario, maybe in New Brunswick, maybe in Saskatchewan, but if we know we're going to do this, let's start now and let's get some suppliers to make this transition. Similarly, if we are going to do this NATO spending bump, again, that won't get announced until May. I think we want to do that, but can we get suppliers? Can we get smaller companies oriented towards that? And then, I mean, I'm generally keen on anything pharma, and especially biopharma, although that's probably an urban thing. I think generally, if this is advice for an economic developer from not an economic developer, remember the economic and economic development. Tourism, my main street, all of that is super valuable, and that's part of your job. But when it comes to some of the investment stuff and the manufacturing stuff, really understanding your micro, macro labor economics and trade economics is important. And if that was not part of your training, like actual economics, there's probably lots of stuff on YouTube. It would be worth brushing up on that.
That's amazing for you to just shift, remind people to shift their mind to another sector, another opportunity, another profitability line. I live very close to those nuclear reactors. Things are shutting down. Maybe more things will be built up. And electricity, there's a huge growth in that. So I just want to wrap up with one final question. And it is from Amber. What is the best type of company to focus investment attractions efforts in right now? I think that's answered actually. Okay, last question here. Okay. Hi, Brendan. I'm from Maxper Energy, EV charging solution provider. The president in the South wants to move the manufacturer back to US. However, the tariff actually put Canada into a better selection to attract investment due to the economic consideration. Do you agree? What other elements do you think that Canada should promote or to act like on to take on this opportunity? Thanks, Simon, from a small business.
I can't really make sense of the question. Sorry. You'd have to.
Simon, do you want to just quickly speak on this? You're on call. You can raise your hand and you can quickly speak on this really quickly. It's really great to have small businesses on the line. And okay, go ahead, Simon.
Hey, Brendan. Hey, Janna. Thanks for hosting. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. Yeah, actually, I have been in the international trading and manufacturing line for a couple of years, and then we've seen Canada has always been the manufacturing hub for the auto sectors and exporting to the U.S. And however, the tariff putting the supply chain cost into the U.S. more costly. So do you see that as an opportunity for Canada? And do you see that Canadians should take on this opportunity to attract the investment from foreign countries, for example, Asian or the Europe market, to promote their capability in the manufacturing and supply chain?
Everything is an opportunity, right?
So what's your perspective?
So crises are opportunities. So yes, there is an opportunity now. I mean, I think if you look at the major investors into at least Ontario recently, they've all been Asian and German.
Yeah.
I mean, Swedish too, but I don't know what's happening with that one. So should Canada continue to pursue a strategy of attracting investment from Japan, Korea, and Germany? Yes, absolutely. Should Canada take a very, very cautious approach with investment from China? Yes. And cautious is put lightly. We still, in 3, 4, 5 years, 10 years, we're still going to do a ton of business with the United States. So, there's standing up for yourself and there's poking the bear. So, yeah, our Japan, Korea, Germany strategy, bang on. A China strategy, I think we want to think really long and hard about that. So
great. Yeah, because Siemens just announced that they are opening up the Oakville facility for their EV charging. So which is an opportunity for business to do in this industry. Thanks for asking. Thanks for answering.
Yeah, German companies tend to be known to be really good with their tier 2 and 3 suppliers. And give them a lot of are really willing to work collaboratively and work together in a very different way than American companies work with their tier 2 and 3 suppliers.
Well, thank you so much for this time. It's great to know who are the key people that are reliable to look at, opportunities to look for new. I used to work in a port community of Prince Rupert, third largest port in Canada, and they have good relationships with East Asian nations like Korea, Japan, and China does provide a lot of shipments. And there's a major boom in the port right now with agriculture and energy right now. So these are just thoughts and things that the Port of Prince Rupert just came out with under 24 hours ago. So thank you for this conversation. I do invite you to come to our next session on April 24th, and it will be on the agriculture and fisheries sector focus. So right here, we're going to have Alida Burke, CFO and co-founder of Grocer, which is this business that is flying right now, growing like crazy because they provide hydroponic kits where you can grow anywhere. in many different climates, especially up north. So it's really cool to open up more supply chains locally by growing goods anywhere. We will have more speakers to be announced, lots of chats next week on confirming those. And I do want to say, if anyone is interested in speaking or recommending speakers, please connect with Francesco. This is his email right there. And thank you so much, Janna and Brendan and Francesco, for just coming together. This is an amazing conversation, and this is really building on everyone's knowledge for us to move forward and get these resources to think deeper on how we can localize our supply chain. Thank you so much for this conversation. I'll see you guys April 24th. Have yourself a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. And I just want to quickly remind everyone that this is also being recorded. If anyone wants to review it or share it with anyone who couldn't make it today, it'll be up on our YouTube channel. And thank you to Brendan and Janna for the great presentations and the great discussion. Thank you, Janet, for helping organize all of this and for moderating. And of course, thank you to all of our audience for taking the time to be here with us. So yeah, thank you so much, and yeah, have a great day.